Good morning, everybody. This is Steve Sabadeski, and we're doing a Google Hangout. By the way, let me ask you, are y'all hearing an echo for me?
Yes.
You are? Okay, bear with me. Okay, so you are. Okay, so let me just quickly do something because I shouldn't have this echo. So let me I'm gonna just get out of this here. Exit. Okay, so okay, how's that? Y'all there? Okay.
Yeah, you're still bleeding over, but I don't know if it'll affect the recording.
I don't know either.
Speaker.
And that could be. We'll just have to see. I'm going to talk to him. Okay. Again, hi. Good morning. This is Steve Sabadeski, and I'm publisher of us.com. And today we're going to have a interesting Google Hangout discussion with Jim Brown and Bernie Pincinat, and we're going to talk about the legislative session. Good morning, Jim, and good morning, Bernie. How y'all doing? One day, day after the legislative session. How y'all doing?
I'm great. This is Bernie. After trying to sort all that happened, I want to hear what Bernie has to say because he's been the more day in, day out guy. I think my perspective is more from the bigger vision of the losers and how far the state has been set back and what will happen over the next few years. So we've got a good mix right here, and we're sure glad to be on your show.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Bernie, go ahead, please. Yeah.
The session, everything about the session was a backdrop of a $1.6 billion deficit that had been we've been aware of for 5, 6, 7 months, and the backdrop was that the public in the survey I did in December, basically talking about the continuing deficits and lack of money, but the public didn't want to hear about it. They were tuned out. We asked them about personal income tax, property taxes, sales taxes, any kind of tax, and they didn't want to fund. They didn't want to pay any more to fund the deficit. So most legislators heard that from back home. Polls showed it. Whoever ran the survey, so they came in and started looking at, as Jim will call it, corporate welfare. And then they started going after exemptions. And of course, that wasn't enough, and they added a 1 penny tax to businesses on utilities. So the backdrop was always bad for the legislature because the public isn't buying that they should be paying more personal taxes. So the legislature went after the areas that they could get the least resistance on a day-to-day basis. So they went after all these exemptions, solar and inventory tax credits, and movie industries, and then of course the utility tax. But so that's where they went, and that's where the session ended with them raising taxes primarily on businesses. Now, the legislators said, "Oh wait, well, we didn't raise any taxes. We actually just reduced exemptions." But there was a tax in there, the tax on utility tax. So that dominated the session. Everything else was little or no consequence. There was some of your usual legislation, with social issues and cleaning up stuff or changing this, but the entire session was about how to fix a $1.6 billion deficit, and literally most of it is quick fixes that the next governor will still have to deal with. So, yeah, Jim's correct on the daily, day-to-day basis was all about trying to find revenue, of which they eventually did, but it was, as we all know, it's complicated by Jindal's insistence that no new net taxes were collected. So it was a weird background, but I'll say this much, that the next governor and everything the legislature did ignored one really important fact. With the $1.6 billion deficit, Louisiana voters had no interest in paying another dime. So how are you going to fix anything? The legislature may have come up with this money this time, but Louisiana can't go much further. They can't fund higher ed or healthcare or anything else, and the public's not willing to pay for it. So to me, what came out of this session was that, in looking at listening to the average person, they don't want to fund government in Louisiana. They don't want to pay another dime. The legislature got away with taking away exemptions and taking money away from business. But the underlying problem that is still there is that there's nobody, the majority of people in Louisiana do not want to pay one more dime out of their pocket to fund state government. So it's a temporary fix, but the real problem's still there, and people don't like or trust, don't believe, think their money's being wasted, you name it. They'll come up with an excuse why they don't want to pay additional taxes out of their pocket to fix anything or even to pay for higher education.
That's, yeah, Jim, go ahead.
Well, I think Bernie's right on the money. And, you know, I think that if your listeners out there and the individual, the taxpayers, as Bernie said, he polls us, he's very accurate what he's saying, don't want to pay any more money. Well, you got to put it in the focus of, say, you and I. You're a person with your family, you're trying to pay your bills, your mortgage is on your home, you can't really borrow any money, but you've got a great amount of additional debt. And so what you do, you've got to use what you have. You've got to work with what you have. And to me, the legislature, as well as the governor, were highly irresponsible in not using what they had. You take the Department of Economic Development, we had to start calling that the Louisiana Welfare Office, and give outs that they give them, billions and billions of dollars given out, and then we don't monitor that money. We don't even know what we get in return. You take the nonprofits. We've got nonprofits galore in this state with serious questions as to how that money's being spent, not being audited properly. Any nonprofit should be getting that kind of money. We don't get the better bang for the buck in higher education. The report came out last week about schools like University of New Orleans, whether it's Southern down in New Orleans, 11% graduation rate after 6 years. Steve, that campus should be shut down. But the legislature doesn't want to do this. They want to stick their fingers in the dike, pacify the governor, and say it's going to be someone's problem next year. As Bernie articulately said, it's going to be a massive problem next year. These business taxes that were put on business, many of them expire, some after 1 year, all after 3 years. So we haven't balanced the budget. There's been what this legislature, this Republican conservative legislature, this Republican conservative governor are going to go down in history as raising more taxes than any time in the history of the state, number one, and number two, loosening up the reins on marijuana. That's going to be their heart. That's going to be the focus of what they'll be remembered for. It's almost on the verge of being malfeasance in office, and there ought to be a pretty good justification for voting anybody who's in office right now. So on the short view, Bernie's got it right. On the long view, where is the leadership going to say, hey, we got to live within our means? Only voice I've heard even halfway addressing this is the Treasurer, Sean Kennedy, and he's been ignored by the legislature as well as the government.
Okay, we have Greg Hilburn, the Monroe News Star, on the Hangout. He's calling in by phone, of course. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, Stephen.
Now, you were there at the scene of the crime. So and you're still there today. So if you don't mind, great, thank you. So why don't you give us an idea as to what happened from your perspective? You were there yesterday. Go ahead.
Well, in the end, as as I suspected, the legislature blinked when the House blinked and voted for the SAVE measure, which I'm sure you guys have already talked about.
No, we have not.
To avert what they considered, what could be damaging cuts to health care, public health care. All of the I talked to the LSU president yesterday. All of the higher ed officials, all of the brass were there lined up to encourage these lawmakers to vote on this cobbled together budget could be passed out and make it a year or maybe less, but to get to the next, like you said, to get to the next corner, to get the can to the next corner, and and it was a frantic. I've just laid your on and off for a long time, but the day yesterday it was the most frenzied and confused house that I remember seeing at the end. It was wild.
Let me make a comment about that because I actually was watching online. It seemed to me that it was a real power play. In other words, here you had two guys in the House who were retiring. One the Speaker, and of course you had the representative from down here in New Orleans, and that took an hour. I mean, my God, you had an hour at the very time, and Governor Jindal comes in during those moments, takes an hour away from whatever he's doing just to be there and to lobby. During the farewell speeches, yeah. I mean, you had Jeff Arnold, who was retiring, and he had his family there, and he's done a great job. And not to take anything away from Jeff Arnold at all, or from the Speaker, but my God, how in the world, when you have all these bills still yet to be discussed, there's no report that has been disseminated to the rest of the legislature, and there's no debate.
Well, that was done, purposely, of course, to force, fast votes without, as you said, the information that many of the lawmakers should want. I don't know that they do, but that they should want before, considering how they're going to vote.
So, I mean, really, what Jim, Bernie, I don't know if you saw this, and I don't know if this is just the way that you do it the last day, but they did suspend the formalities, so therefore they suspended debate. It was basically an up or down vote on the conference reports, and the legislators had not seen the reports. So they were voting just based upon what the conferees had voted for, and no questions at all, except for the one piece of legislation, which is the SAFE legislation. And that, quite frankly, was cut off also. So, I mean, is this democracy? I mean, to me, I think this is democracy by tyranny, but that's just my opinion. So you guys have more experience, Jim. You're being down there as a senator, as a secretary of state, insurance commissioner. Bernie, you're being down there. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, Steve, let me insert what the problem. Jim mentioned it. They went into this session with no taxpayer. Most taxpayers in Louisiana are saying, we're not going to give you another dime for higher education. We're not going to give you another dime for health. You asked me for fund the state of Louisiana's budget. I'm not interested in paying another nickel. And that's what we have today, and it's still there, and it's adamant. People are adamant. And what they did was they went and found the easiest way to get around that but the problem is still there, and you call them shenanigans or whatever. Has watched this for years. They watched it. They watched this. Read about the SAVE Act. So the next governor's come. Whoever the next governor is and the next legislature, they've got to deal with the public's unwillingness to give them another dime, and they can't go back to business. So it's not so much what happened this session, which is a Band-Aid, but at some point in time, somebody's got to fix the problem with the public and their unwillingness to want to pay another dime to the state of Louisiana to run state government. And until you fix that, I don't know how the state of Louisiana and the legislature, why would you want to go back to the legislature with the public's disdain for paying additional money to the state of Louisiana? Look, when college-educated people in Louisiana, when you ask them, do you want to fund higher education to avoid a huge budget deficit or to shut down universities, and the response is, and these are the educated people, no, I don't want to pay any money. So we've got a really serious problem that is somebody's got to address at some point in time, which is you can't keep running government when the public has no confidence in how it's being spent, period. And that's an underlying problem that somebody better come up with a way, to get the public more interested in helping fund the government that they're getting.
The Bernie? I'm sorry, Jim?
Yeah, well, Bernie is dead on. As far as the specific question you asked, I would tell you this, that there's really nothing new about getting pushed at the last minute. You're always saying you're going to make it work. Back when I was in the Senate, the deadline was midnight. You can cut it down, and oh my gosh, the tension and it was the pressure and the alcohol-infused debates that went on were something. I remember one occasion where J.E. Gillenville, a big various senator that lived in the Baton Rouge area, was fighting to get a technical school, vocational school over in his district. And there was a give and take. We were approaching midnight, and everybody was saying, you got to do something. We got to vote. It's almost midnight. I'm sitting right next to Gillenville. He pulls off his boot, his cowboy boot, and he throws it as hard as he can at the clock in back of us so that the clock would stop and not at midnight. So there's some pretty rancorous stories as to what happened in the past. I think the problem this time around, Steve, is there was so much acrimony on the part of the public. Jindal's unpopularity, his leaving the state, his failure to lead, no real vision out of the legislature, no real leadership emerging. The leaders internally behind the scenes trying to make it work with an uncooperative governor. All that in the mix created this climate that at the very end, it just went crazy. And so I think that does happen in times in the past, but there's a little bit more predictability and there's a little bit better leadership from the governor's office than we've seen right now. That made it look terrible. And Bernie's right, there's a huge lack of confidence in the legislature, a lack of people wanting to spend more money. That's why I'd say the next governor, whoever he or she may be, back to the drawing board, say, okay, let's start what we have. Let's get a lot more bang out of the we gave all this new money, not new money, but higher education is always came too greatly. There was not one effort by any legislator to say, what kind of return are we getting on this money? How efficient are these universities? Who's teaching our kids? Why does Louisiana rank at the bottom of every southern state? Why isn't there one major university in the top 150 in the country? Why is LSU not second rate but a third rate educational system? So as a consequence, the legislature gave out the money to try to put their fingers in the dike, but did not demand any accountability. And as Bernie says, that's going to be the challenge for the next governor and the new legislature.
Greg, is the budget really balanced?
Well, but technically, but we really don't know. I mean, we haven't. I talked to a lawmaker this morning. Said, I hope nothing got. I hope we didn't do anything too wrong. They don't know. They didn't see they didn't have time to analyze the final conference reports. That no one's analyzed them yet. I hadn't, and that'll come today and this weekend maybe. But so But yeah, I mean, it'll technically be balanced. It has to be. So they'll make adjustments. It'll be balanced, but it's still not. It's not what you would call, you know, an efficient way
Now,
to run things.
so by making adjustments, though, you're talking.
Well, it's balanced, but it has a lot of money that really doesn't exist. So
Right.
the next
Well, is it really balanced, though? I mean, the thing is that the government made commitments that he's not going to veto, and so what's he going to veto in order to balance the budget? Am I misreading this?
Well, one problem, Steve, that we've got to recognize is that some pretty well thought out voices, including the Public Affairs Research Council, the Bureau of Government in New Orleans, Treasurer John Kennedy, all are saying that a good number of these revenue enhancements were not passed by a 2/3 vote, and therefore they're open to a challenge. So if the budget is or is not balanced, there's going to be a huge hole there the courts create by throwing out some of these enhancements that did not get the 2/3 vote. C.B. Ferguson, for example, is very articulately written about the fact that you need a 2/3 vote. And they didn't get these to 2/3 in a number of the proposals out there. So it may be a lot worse. Whatever it is right now, it may in the next couple of months be a lot worse.
That's true.
Go on.
But someone has to challenge it, and which would make for a good news story. But there's a lot of things that could go challenged, and most never do. The truth of the matter is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree, and not only that, you have to be willing to spend a lot of your personal money, and then you have to prove that you have some reason to be part of or even file the suit. But you're correct, and most people don't have $200,000 or $300,000 to spend on going all the way through the process, which is a minimal couple $100,000 to get through the court. So.
Which you may just do it on principle.
Yeah. Well, principle, unfortunately, doesn't get you very far in courts.
Right.
But okay, so even if they don't file a lawsuit to challenge, how are they going to balance? This was done at the last minute. We have no idea what's going to happen. So therefore, we're talking about a gubernatorial veto of some of the measures, or we're talking about a cut either prior to Jindal's leaving or after he leaves. Is that how we're going to balance the budget?
If it comes up short, what they do is you make mid-year budget cuts as you go, which has been done every year for the past few years that I can remember. That's how.
Yeah.
I don't think it's done. I think the analysis of what was done, and what the consequences are is what's going to determine the fate of the taxpayers and the services they get. They passed the budget. They've done it this way for I guess for the last 5, 6, 7 years. I don't think taxpayers are going to get that upset about it. They can make corrections. What is important is what they did didn't solve the problem. What they did sets up the next governor to have an incredibly tough time. And what they didn't do anything to solve the problem that the legislature and the governor has with the taxpayers and their unwillingness to give them another dime. And how's the state of Louisiana going to continue to operate unless they cut $1.6 billion? Because they don't have the revenue to pay for it.
Well, that's right. And the key, as you mentioned, as Bernie mentioned, the only tax that doesn't sunset is the cigarette tax. So, and that's $108 million. So we're talking about $600 million that will disappear again either in a year or by the end of 3 years, certainly.
So
we don't have any footing right now to take the next step for the next governor, which is to have enough revenue, and you've got to change the system. But before you can change the system, you can do what they did in tax business, but the next governor's got to somehow convince the public that they've got to pay more, and that's going to be a really tough selling job, because we probably have a Republican governor, probably have a Republican legislature, and as Jim Brown pointed out, it's not going to last too long where Republicans are going to be leading the charge for more and more revenue, and find their life will become very uncomfortable.
Which raises, go on, Greg.
Ultimately, there were many, most Democrats and many of the Republicans wanted to, vote down the save and go to a veto session. But what the truth of the matter is, they could have gotten to a veto session. I talked to Larry O. The Senate would join them. But getting to a veto session was the easy part. I mean, you got to remember, most of these votes, as was pointed out earlier, Stephen, Bernie, Jim, they were hard votes, and they didn't get 70 votes. It would absolutely take 70 votes for an override. So hell, then you get your 600 million in the hole, or 700. So that had they gone, it was easy to say we'll go to a veto session and override. Well, that was the session should have happened, but the override was unlikely, in my opinion.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, to get the simple majority was very difficult, and what was amazing was you had so many Republicans walking around, because they know some of them are going to walk out of that building and they voted 8 or 9 times for taxes. And as Republicans, we haven't seen that. That was the way Democrats did it. But it was amazing to talk to some of them. Oh, look, I only voted for one tax, the utility tax. I didn't vote for any other tax. That's not a tax. We only took away an exemption. Look, I've been doing this a long time. When you're trying to justify to me that what is it? It walks like a duck. It quacks like a duck. It's a duck. But so I was amazed at how before the session was over, they were already trying to figure out how we're going to go back home and as Republicans say, no, I didn't raise taxes on anybody. It's hilarious.
Well, we spent a lot of time trying to escape from raising taxes according to taxes. So I know both ways. But let me ask you a question. It seemed to me that what we're dealing with is the Republicans suddenly became Democrats, and Democrats suddenly became Republicans. I mean, for an example, the Democrats in the beginning of the session were saying, we got to save education, we have to save healthcare. But at the very end, they were saying, well, we can take a gamble and engage into a veto session, putting healthcare and education at severe risk. And likewise, we're talking about the Republicans suddenly saying, hey, no, we need to raise these taxes, and we're going to do it by by this Band-Aid, actually what I call a fraud. I mean, I call that a tax fraud. I mean, we were engaged in fraud to our kids, our students. Oh, absolutely. It was a tax fraud.
Well, look, Steve, it is, but the average person, I'm going to explain to you something. Gender got away with all and it goes back to the other line. Gender was able to always know that he could do all of the budget gimmickry because he wasn't raising personal taxes, and the public did not care. Do all of that stuff, just don't ask me for more taxes. I never ran any survey or had anybody on the street stop me and say, can you believe Jindal's doing? You know what? They didn't care because he wasn't raising their taxes, and if things had to be cut, they had to be cut. They didn't like that. They complained about it, that he's cutting this and he's cutting that. But again, they didn't really care, Steve, because they weren't asked to pay more taxes. So I had never saw a survey, never have seen anything showing me that people were mad at Jindal because of the average, the majority of voters, because of all of the stuff he did to avoid taxes. They didn't really care about that stuff. It ends up being a humongous problem in this session by doing all of that. But you can talk about that stuff till the cows come home. The problem continues to be, it's not about all the gimmickry. It's about why won't voters pay more taxes? Because they don't like what they got.
Well, Bernie makes a good point. The people in this building, the Capitol, and those political junkies like you guys, they know about the SAVE and all that. Look, most people don't know that. If I went out today, on 3rd Street and just started asking people about the SAVE, they wouldn't know anything about it, wouldn't care. And that's the truth about it. That's how you get away. They're not engaged, not so deeply engaged as we are, and you try to explain it to them, and they don't have 15 minutes for you to explain it to them. So there's no way. That's how you keep getting. That's how not just SAVE, but a lot of legislation is passed. No one. They got families to worry about and a job to go to, or maybe they need a job. They're not delving into this like we do.
For whatever reason, it kept the university from being cut. It didn't cost them anything. It kept this or that open or whatever. They paid no skin. There was no sacrifice made. So why do they care?
Picking up on that, Steve, I think that Bernie made that point, and what his polling is showing. I think that's the next challenge for the next governor, quite frankly, is to say, look, this is a mess, and we've got some things that needs to be done. We've got $10 billion of infrastructure projects that have not been addressed in this session of the legislature. We've got massive road building construction, universities with buildings crumbling. There's a lot of needs out there. But as Bernie said, people have no confidence the money's being spent well. So if I could give advice to the next governor, and I ran for governor once, nobody paid any attention to me then. They probably won't pay any attention to me now. But I think the next governor would say, look, I got to manage what we have a heck of a lot better. I'm going to go in and do a detailed internal audit of the Department of Economic Development. Are we getting the best bang for the buck? The average business guy out there doesn't get any handouts. Why do these businesses get handouts, or are we getting enough return? Number one. Number two, the services you're getting. We pick up the paper every day about fraud in these nonprofits. John Kennedy, the treasurer, listed all kinds of them. Let's get back in an audit. Do we be putting out all this money in that vein, number one? Are we getting the best returns from our universities and the people that are getting the money? They never really get seriously audited to see not just that the money wasn't ripped off, but that we're getting a good return. We're getting a quality return, because in every level you look at, Louisiana is the bottom of the barrel, including education. So, yeah, maybe the guy isn't stealing computers, but is he giving us a good return in terms of his work product? All that needs to be done to tighten up. There's a lot of money to be saved. If the public sees the governor doing that, then they may be much more willing to step up and support some needs. But you got to restore that confidence, as Bernie said. Right now, it's not being done.
Apparently, Greg had to drop off, or did drop off. Go ahead, Bernie.
Well, if you're running for governor and you watch this session and you look at what the survey showed by myself and numerous others about unwillingness to pay taxes, and what was really interesting was the college educated were totally turned off by paying taxes for higher education. I don't, if you're going to be the next governor, you can't do what they just did. So what else is out there? But I think Jim's right, Kennedy's right. I'm sure anybody watching this, the Republicans left town without being able to say we reformed higher education. We gave them this money, and they're going to go do what they've been doing. The Republicans perform much better when they're spending money. When they have to spend money, they have to justify it. They have to tell their voters we reform this and we reform that, you're going to get a bigger bang for your buck. But we're not doing that, and the next governor's has to do that, or we're going to be a state with very little revenue, with a lot of government we can't pay for, and I don't care who the next governor is, he's not going to go have a special session and raise taxes on us taxpayers and get out of there alive. I mean, the numbers aren't there right now. You've got a tremendous selling job to do to the voters, because the legislators can ignore those numbers, but the reality is we got a disconnect, and they did what they did, but it didn't help the problem. It probably exacerbated.
It probably exacerbated. How in the world are these guys going to, whether Republicans or Democrats, how are they going to campaign? I mean, the Republicans are going to campaign against guys who said, "Hey, it wasn't my fault. I wasn't there. You know, I'm going to cut. I'm not going to raise taxes like these guys. I'm going to cut." The
Chemical Association. Are they happy with these tax increases? They had kind of a level of concern that you had to vote with them so many times, but are they going to support many of these Republican legislators, or are they going to look for some alternatives? So there's a lot of uncertain jockeying politically going on right now behind the scenes, and to see just where the money's going to flow. Economists have and they usually have, but if the rug is pulled out for them by some of these business groups, you see just supporting someone else, but actually going out and stirring up candidates to oppose some of these folks. So we've got a real interesting next month or two seeing the jockeying going on within the legislative session. So, and with that very comment, Steve, I've got to sign off, but I'm going to sure watch and just hang out to hear what Bernie has to say.
Okay, terrific. Jim, thank you.
Hey, Jim, great, and I appreciate you had a lot of good info. And I'll add to what Jim said, and I'll put on my campaign consultant or pollster cap right now. In the last 20 years, the business community has led the charge and beaten especially the most white Democrats, and they replaced them with Republicans. That's why we only have a handful of white Democrats left. So you now have a session where lobby, which has been at the forefront of this, has had a very bad session considering the results of the number of Republicans voting against him. As a consultant, for the last 12, 13 years, if you're working for a Republican, you got the Republican Party endorsement, plus you have lobbies endorsement and their money. It's going to be a different world. I don't know how this is going to work out. You'll have Republicans who really won't have opposition there in districts, or they're very popular. But for about half of the Republicans, at least, they're going to be running. They could be running for re-election, and they may go back to the Capitol without having been endorsed by lobby or the Republican Party. And if I'm running their campaign, or I'm really uncomfortable with them being put in this new position or new image of no business endorsements or not getting money from business, and they're sort of out there alone. That's the thing that I don't have a clear picture of how this is going to work with the disconnect that you have right now from the business community and a lot of Republicans.
Well, LeBlanc says, doesn't make it, wouldn't it, if the top Republican candidates, say for governor.
Hello?
Yeah, are you there? Can you hear me? Bernie? Hello, Bernie. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Bernie? Bernie, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yeah. I can hear you. Bernie? Well, Bernie, that was a very interesting analysis. And guys, listen, I really appreciate you taking your time and joining us in this hangout. Really, we're using some very unique technology. I don't think that really has ever been used before in the world, to be honest with you, a combination of these technologies. So, listen, thank you guys for joining us, and I really appreciate it. And we're absolutely going to have to do this again. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.